Villains of the civil rights movement. Bull Connor, the sheriff of Birmingham. Orville Faubus, the governor who stands in the Arkansas schoolhouse and blocks little black kids from getting in. All of these guys. The author of Segregation Now, Segregation Tomorrow, Segregation Forever, George Wallace, Democrat. And so it is going back through American history. The Ku Klux Klan is founded by a delegate to the Democratic National Convention. To quote Eric Foner, the historian at Columbia, progressive, and he must have had indigestion saying this. But he says, for 30 years, the Ku Klux Klan was the domestic terrorist arm of the Democratic Party. End quote. The case against this is so weak and preposterous, it comes down to one guy, David Duke. Well, what about David Duke? Well, first of all, David Duke is persona non grata in the Republican Party. If you made a list of all the grand wizards, grand cyclopses, heads of the Ku Klux Klan going back to the 1860s, 99% of them are Democrats. Can one guy, David Duke, cancel out all of them? So this is the level, the magnitude of distortion that we're dealing with. But isn't it true, we hear as a final resort, that the two parties switch sides?
Yeah.
The Republicans all became Democrats, and the Democrats all became Republicans. Now, for anyone who's like not born yesterday, actually lives and works in politics, for something like this to happen, you have to admit it's a little strange. It's kind of like if someone were to tell you, if you came from another country, you know, in America, a very interesting thing happened in 1963. The cops all became robbers. And the robbers all became cops. There was a big switch. Really? It's like that. Someone makes a claim that is manifestly stupid, but it is said with so much pomposity and so much authority that the ordinary person is a little stunned into submission, as if it has to be true. Now, the reason that this big switch has even an iota of plausibility is because two switches do occur, but they're not the switch that's being talked about. So, for example, blacks who are overwhelmingly Republican in the 19th century and early 20th century do become Democrats. But when does this occur? In the 1930s. FDR got 75% of the black vote. And at that time, the Democratic Party was manifestly the party of segregation and the Ku Klux Klan. It admitted it. So obviously blacks didn't switch because of race. Blacks switched because of welfare benefits, because of the New Deal. And the South, which used to be Democratic, did in fact move into the Republican camp. But again, it's not because of what the left goes, well, it's because of Nixon's Southern strategy. Tricky Dick. He was basically whispering racist messages into the ears of Southern segregationists, thus causing the Democratic racists to become Republicans. First of all, if that were true, somebody should be able to provide 5 public racist statements that were made by Nixon ever in any of his campaigns. This is, by the way, going back to the 50s, continuing through the 60s and 70s. No one has been able to supply even one. Now, we know that in private, Nixon was one heck of a weird guy. He actually liked nobody. If you listen to the Watergate tapes, he doesn't like the Irish, he doesn't like the Italians, he's not too hot on the Jews, he's not too happy about blacks, he hates the Ivy League. Henry, how many Ivy Leaguers are on our State Department list? I think it's way too many. This is Nixon. Strange bird. But because Nixon was a Machiavellian, he was very careful about what he said in public. And in public, you won't get any racism out of Nixon. In other words, this whole Southern strategy is apparently based upon Nixon sending smoke signals. to Southern racists. And again, if you want to press the point, you ask, okay, let's say Nixon did that. Let's say Nixon was speaking in code. Let's say you had to squeeze lemon juice on his campaign statements and the racism came out. Okay, how many of the racist Dixiecrats, of which there were dozens, became Republicans? Let's count them. It turns out that of this whole list of racist Dixiecrats, the number of them that moved to the Republican camp is exactly one. Strom Thurmond. That's it. All the other racists stayed in the Democratic Party. Again, don't take my word for it. Look it up. If you can find one more Dixiecrat who switched, let me know. But you won't be able to do it because there aren't any. There aren't any. So think about this. The progressives in academia and the media have been able to con very intelligent people in the digital age when we are in a position to check that the Dixiecrats all became Republicans. It is flatly untrue. It's flatly untrue. Now, let me sum up. We're in an era in which big lies are pervasive. And the reason that big lies can be told is because the left is very dominant in academia and Hollywood and the media, which are the three big megaphones of our culture. If you have all three, you can put out all kinds of big lies. You might know it's false, but how are you going to counter it? You don't have a megaphone.
Right.
So this is what's been going on. And by the way, while Republicans focus totally on electoral victories and Trump and how do we keep the House and how do we keep the Senate, you have to remember that political victories are precarious. You win, you lose. There's a pendulum that swings this way and that. But the domination of the left in these institutions is pretty well permanent. Pretty well permanent. And I think this is where you come in, which is to say that the job of a university is to take all these assumptions that have been so deeply entrenched that it almost seems like heresy to challenge them. It's like when Whittaker Chambers stopped being a communist. He goes, it was like confessing a murder. In other words, he felt so guilty. He felt it was so damning for him to do what he did. And this is the enforced conformity that is imposed on us in the country. It's bad enough in the country, it's much worse on the campus. Because the campus is supposed to be about investigation and checking things out. So my message to you at the end of the day is not necessarily accept everything I told you, but try to see that there's enough true in what I just said that you're being sold a little bit of a bill of goods. And so your job is ultimately not just to be Republican organizers, but ultimately to declare, make a declaration of independence from this reigning orthodoxy. Refuse to be its intellectual slave. Refuse to nod like a moron every time you're told something that you're not even sure is true. Mm-hmm. But you know that this tremendous weight of conformity, this bogus pressure of public virtue is sort of pressing upon you to go along. And I'm saying it takes a tremendous act of courage. At the end of the day, to me, that's 90% of Trump's strength. He has huge bravery. He's not going to walk in the parameters that have been established. He's going to ultimately challenge the rules. And my message to you is, here at UCLA, here on the campus, your mission should be to do the same. Thank you very much.